What's going on, everybody? Today we are back with another video. Trade targets in week number 4 of the NFL season. If you guys are new to this channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. And of course, at the end, if you did enjoy the content or it was helpful in any way, drop a thumbs up. We're starting it off here with Jerome Ford. This past Sunday, Jerome Ford went against the toughest rushing defense in the entire NFL, the Tennessee Titans. Now, it's safe to say that in this matchup, he did struggle, all right? 1.8 yards per carry. But what he did do was save his fantasy day by scoring a touchdown not only on the ground, but also through the air. He ended up having 19.1 PPR fantasy points, which you will take every single day of the week. Now, in the previous 2 games, the running backs playing against the Tennessee Titans were Joshua Kelly and Jamal Williams. Joshua Kelly in week 2 was held to just 3.9 PPR fantasy points, and then Jamal Williams in week 1 had 7.2 PPR fantasy points. So 19.1 against this Tennessee run defense is very good. All right. If you quickly glance from the outside of the box score here, you're going to notice that there is a lot of players that got carries, and it's probably going to scare you. I'm not going to lie to you. You'll see that Pierre Strong had 6 carries. You're going to see that Kareem Hunt had 5 carries. Ford only had 10 carries. So you're thinking from the outside, this must be a running back by committee. No. All right. Jerome Ford played on 40 snaps compared to Hunt's 14 and Pierre Strong's 8 total snaps. So when Pierre Strong was in the game, he was basically in the game to get those carries late in the ballgame. Now back to Jerome Ford. All right. He has 2 tough matchups in my eyes coming up, and he is still clearly the #1 running back on this team. They're going against the Ravens next week, and then they get the San Francisco 49ers. Apparently, the Ravens aren't as big of an issue as we would have thought in weeks prior, because Zach Moss and the Colts just absolutely torched them last week. Zach Moss had a great game. So I guess the only tough game left is against the 49ers after their bye week here. Also, if Jerome Ford continues to lead this backfield into your fantasy football playoffs, he ends up playing the Chicago Bears, the Houston Texans, and the New York Jets. It doesn't get much easier than that stretch right there. Next player up on this list, we have Jaylen Waddle. Usually you have to be very careful about going after guys that are just injured, coming back from an injury, but concussions are much different, all right? People normally come back from concussions and they are right back to playing where they left off with no performance hit. Game number 1, he had a mild 11.8 PPR fantasy points in terms of Jaylen Waddle standards. That's pretty mild. Game number 2, he was sitting at 12.4 before heading out of the game with that concussion. Now, I think it's safe to say that this offense can put up a couple of points per game. All right. Now, what did they put up again? I think it was 70 points against the Denver Broncos, 70-20, and that was without Jaylen Waddle in this lineup. As long as Tua Tagovailoa is healthy, I think it's safe to say that this team is going to score a lot of points on a weekly basis. What I would be doing in this situation is trying to catch people off guard in your league and forgetting that Waddle finished with over 1,350 total receiving yards in 2022. When he comes back and starts finding the end zone eventually, and he ends up hitting that Waddle dance and he's going against you, you are going to feel maximum pain. All right. You should have known deep down to go after Jaylen Waddle after week number 3. This is your chance right here. Go get him. Next up, we have Jakobi Meyers. Jakobi Meyers is a guy right now that is flying very under the radar so far into this season. Personally, I haven't heard about anybody talking about what Jakobi Meyers is doing on the opposite side of Davante Adams in Las Vegas. While Davante Adams had his classic Davante Adams game, scoring over 40 PPR fantasy points on Sunday night against the Steelers, Jakobi Meyers once again had over 10 targets in this matchup. He's proving to be a solid number 2 on the opposite side of the field as Adams. So far in the 2 games that he's played, Meyers has had 10 targets and 12 targets and is the clear number 2, like I was just saying. Now, it wasn't ever really a question whether Meyers would be the number 1, because we know Davante Adams is that superstar freak talent. He was always going to be the number 1. That doesn't mean that there can't be coexisting wide receivers in this offense that could be fantasy relevant. All right. Along with getting all those targets as well, Meyers has been playing a close second in snap count to Davante Adams, whereas Hunter Renfrow is completely irrelevant in this offense. Just 2 years ago, Hunter Renfrow had over 1,000 receiving yards, and now he can't buy more than 2 targets per game. on this offense. So for the time being, I think Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers are the only two viable starters on this offense other than maybe Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is looking atrocious right now, but we won't get into that right now. Jacoby Myers, I think, is the guy you go out and trade for right now because he's going to be relevant the entire season. Next up, we have Ceedee Lamb. The Cowboys just looked straight up flat this weekend against the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think there is too much to really overthink in this situation. Lamb still tied the team lead in targets at 7, played the most snaps on the team, and ran the most routes on the team as well. I think Ceedee Lamb is easily a top 10 wide receiver for the rest of this season. If you can trade someone like Alexander Mattison and someone else in a package deal for Ceedee Lamb somehow, maybe it's going to have to be a good piece of your team. All right, I'm just saying, if you can throw in a piece like Alexander Mattison, who had one good week, or Damian Pierce, perhaps. We're going to talk about those guys in the next video. But anyways, go out and package something together for Ceedee Lamb. The next couple of games isn't really great, though, for the Cowboys. They play the Patriots and then the 49ers. But the schedule opens up a bit more with the Chargers, Rams, Eagles, and the Giants, who can all be thrown on. We've seen it in the past here. Now, despite the tough matchups coming up for Ceedee Lamb, I would still be playing him as my either wide receiver number 1 or 2 every single week, regardless. Does not matter. Next up, we're talking about Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore was definitely a hot topic this offseason. A lot of news from the Browns saying that he was going to be heavily involved in this offense throughout the year. I think we are beginning to see signs that that will come true in the near future. The first 2 weeks of the season, the targets were there, but the conversion rate wasn't. All right, week number 1, he had 3 catches on 7 targets. Week number 2, 3 catches on 9 targets. This past week, in week 3, he finally converted all of those targets into catches, but didn't do too much after the catch, which was the main problem. I think it's only a matter of time in this situation before he combines these targets. He has the explosive play ability to break some long ones. It's only a matter of time before that happens, and fantasy managers get the production that they are looking for out of Elijah Moore. Now, the good thing about Moore as well is he plays just as many snaps as Amari Cooper and Peoples-Jones, so he should have plenty of opportunities in this offense going forward, especially with them losing Nick Chubb last week. Obviously, that's going to boost Ford up the depth chart and get him more opportunities, but I think they are not going to be running quite as much as they would have with Nick Chubb on this team and healthy. I wouldn't give up anything crazy. When you're going out to get Elijah Moore, don't give up anything too crazy. Maybe your flex option would be enough to get you Elijah Moore. Maybe stash him on the bench for right now. But definitely keep him in mind for future weeks here. I think he could be a great second half of the year option for you. Next player is Chris Olave. All right, Olave definitely has the highest current value on this entire list based on where he was drafted. But he really is a number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football. I don't think there's any argument about that. He's been very consistent through these first couple of weeks here. Has not found the end zone just yet, though. So his value could be much higher in the upcoming weeks here than it has been through the first 3. 19.2 in week 1, 14.6 in week 2, and 18.4 in week number 3. If you drafted Chris Olave in that 3rd round of your fantasy football draft, you are feeling great. I think he is about to explode very soon. I know you'd have to give up a good chunk of your roster to get Chris Olave on your team, but I think he's worth it. I really do. Next person up, we have Anthony Richardson. He was on last week's trade for video, and the same things apply in this one because he was out in week 3 due to a concussion. I'm going to put a little video link in the top right-hand corner if you want to go watch last week's trade for video. It included players like A.J. Brown. It was Alexander Mattison and a couple other people. I mean, Alexander Mattison, we're going to make another video about him very shortly. But as for Anthony Richardson goes, he looked great through the first 1.5 games played so far this season. Week number 1, he had 20.92 fantasy points. Week number 2, he had 17.74 in just 2 quarters of football. He is definitely the mobile quarterback that your fantasy football team needs. He is the Justin Fields that you drafted. All right, he really is. If you drafted Justin Fields, you missed out on Anthony Richardson because that is what you were looking for when you drafted Justin Fields. Anthony Richardson is him right now. He's developed a nice little connection so far with Michael Pittman Jr., and Josh Downs seems to be emerging as the number 2 wide receiver in Indianapolis. hopefully that would be a nice little 1-2 combo for Richardson to work with. I think this team could be even better if Jonathan Taylor comes back and plays with the Colts. Not really sure where it stands right now, if that's actually going to happen or not, but it would be very intriguing to see how that would turn out for the Colts. I think they could put together a nice little run with those 3 to 4 solid options on offense. Zay Flowers is next up on this list. Zay is still a buy low candidate for me because he hasn't found the end zone. All right, he hasn't had that breakout week just yet that we're all expecting from Zay Flowers. He is insanely consistent, though, throughout the first 3 weeks of his rookie season especially. He had 10 targets again this past Sunday, which is pretty much expected at this point where he's going to get a high target share on this team. So far into this season, he has been the most targeted member on the entire team, led the team in total snaps on the field along with routes run as well. Right now, if Zay Flowers is on your team and you're not starting him, I really don't know what you're doing at this point. He is a locked and loaded flex spot position going forward, and if you don't have any shares of Zay Flowers on your fantasy teams right now, I think you need to go out and get some before it's too late. Next up, we have Jerry Jeudy, and then I'm going to do a little bit of an honorable mention here. But Jerry Jeudy, now 2 weeks back from his injury. Last week, he had 5.5 PPR fantasy points, and then this past week, finished with 13.1 PPR fantasy points. He bumped up his snap count to 47 out of a possible 62 offensive snaps, just behind Courtland Sutton for the wide receivers. I mean, the problem in this situation isn't necessarily Jerry Jeudy. It's the Broncos offense, and we saw exactly that on Sunday where they got absolutely blown out of the water. 70-20 is just an embarrassment to that organization right there. However, as bad as it sounds, this could, however, work out in your favor because they would have to throw the ball a lot more because their running game with Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine right now is not getting going at all. All right, you're hoping for better weeks to come from this Broncos offense as a whole, but the one encouraging thing from this game, or two, I should say, is one, Courtland Sutton, and number two, Jerry Jeudy. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about that honorable mention. It is going to be Aaron Jones. He has been out since week number 1 due to that lingering hamstring injury. He's clearly the best running back on the Green Bay Packers, especially after seeing what A.J. Dillon has done these past 2 weeks as the starter. It's disgusting. I don't want any part of A.J. Dillon right now, and he is just disappointing so many fantasy owners. I know that's not his main goal, is to, make fantasy owners proud, but come on, dude. You're not making your team proud at this point. Anyways, as for Aaron Jones goes, it's very tough for me to say go out and get a guy with a lingering hamstring injury just in case he re-aggravates that. He could easily end up on the IR, and it could be a disaster situation for you. So if you have a high risk tolerance, I would say go out and grab Aaron Jones at the lowest point that he's going to be at. But just know in the back of your mind, he could head to IR if something else happens. You got to be willing to take the risk here with Aaron Jones. It could, though, pay out huge in your favor towards the end of this season. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, as always, make sure to drop a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We are heading to 2,000 subs. Hopefully we get there this week. Anyways, I'll catch you in the next